It was a crime scene unlike any other in American history. Not a bank vault cracked open in the dead of night, nor a quiet suburban home shattered by a sudden act of violence, but the very heart of American democracy, the United States Capitol building, under siege in broad daylight. On January 6, 2021, a political process, the peaceful transfer of power, was violently interrupted, transforming a ceremonial count of electoral votes into a chaotic, bloody confrontation. This was not a protest. It was an invasion, a calculated act of political terrorism that left a trail of destruction, injury, and death, and exposed the fragile fault lines of a nation. Remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Calendar of Crime. Coming soon to Substack. The events of January 6th did not begin on that cold Wednesday morning. They were the culmination of months of sustained, deliberate effort to undermine the democratic process. Following the November 2020 election, a campaign of disinformation, fueled by false claims of widespread fraud, took root. This narrative, often referred to as the Stop the Steal movement, was aggressively promoted across media platforms, convincing millions that the election had been stolen and that only drastic action could save the country. In the weeks leading up to the joint session of Congress, the rhetoric escalated. Rallies were held, lawsuits were filed and dismissed, and key figures within the political sphere openly discussed radical, even unconstitutional, ways to prevent the certification of the Electoral College votes. The focus narrowed to Vice President Mike Pence, who was scheduled to preside over the session. Pressure was immense for him to unilaterally reject the results from certain states, a power he did not legally possess. As the sun rose on January 6th, thousands of people gathered at the Ellipse near the White House for the Save America rally. The atmosphere was charged, a mix of fervent patriotism and simmering rage. Many attendees were dressed in tactical gear, carrying flags, and openly discussing their intent to march on the Capitol. The speeches delivered that morning were a final, explosive call to action. Speakers repeated the baseless claims of a stolen election and urged the crowd to fight for their country. The most significant address came from the outgoing president, who told his supporters they would be marching to the Capitol and that they needed to fight like hell or they wouldn't have a country anymore. By the time the joint session of Congress convened at 1 p.m. to begin the formal count of the electoral votes, the crowd was already moving. What began as a march quickly devolved into a violent confrontation at the Capitol perimeter. The security presence was woefully inadequate, a fact that would later be the subject of intense scrutiny. At the western perimeter, the initial line of defense simple bike racks was quickly overwhelmed. Rioters, many wearing military-style gear and coordinating their movements, pushed past the thin line of Capitol police officers. The first physical breaches of the police line occurred just before 1 p.m., signaling the shift from protest to insurrection. The officers who stood in the way were subjected to brutal, sustained assaults. They were beaten with flagpoles, sprayed with chemical irritants, and crushed against doors. The sheer volume and aggression of the crowd proved too much for the undermanned force. The Capitol, a symbol of peaceful governance, was now a battleground. By 2:11 p.m., the first rioters had smashed windows and entered the building. The breach triggered an immediate, frantic scramble inside. Vice President Pence, who was presiding over the Senate, was quickly evacuated from the chamber, narrowly avoiding the mob that was now roaming the halls. The certification process was halted. Lawmakers, staff, and journalists were forced to shelter in place, barricading themselves in offices or being rushed to secure undisclosed locations. The images that followed were shocking. Rioters occupying the Senate dais, ransacking the offices of congressional leaders, and carrying off property as trophies. The intent was clear: to stop the constitutional process by force. Chants of "Hang Mike Pence" echoed through the halls, a chilling testament to the mob's rage and the direct threat to the vice president. The mob was hunting for specific individuals, turning the Capitol into a maze of terror for those trapped inside. Meanwhile, pleas for help from Capitol Police Chief Steven Sund were initially met with bureaucratic delay. The National Guard, which should have been a rapid response force, was slow to be deployed, a decision that cost critical time and allowed the violence to escalate. It took hours for the full weight of federal and state law enforcement to arrive and begin the process of clearing the building. The building was finally secured just after 5:30 p.m. The damage was extensive, both physical and symbolic. The Capitol was defiled, its halls littered with debris, broken glass, and the remnants of the day's violence. More importantly, the human cost was staggering. Several people died in connection with the events of that day. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who had been attacked by rioters, died the next day after suffering 2 strokes. 4 other officers who defended the Capitol later died by suicide. One rioter, Ashley Babbitt, was fatally shot while attempting to climb through a broken window into the Speaker's lobby. In the months and years that followed, the legal reckoning began. Hundreds of individuals were arrested and charged with crimes ranging from parading and demonstrating to seditious conspiracy. The investigations revealed the depth of the planning and coordination among extremist groups like the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. Despite the chaos, the constitutional process was ultimately completed. Late that night, Congress reconvened in the same chamber the mob had occupied. At 3:42 a.m. on January 7, 2021, the electoral votes were certified, confirming Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. The attack failed to achieve its objective, but it succeeded in leaving an indelible scar on the nation's history. The events of January 6, 2021 stand as a stark reminder that democracy is not self-sustaining. It requires constant vigilance and defense. It is a case study in how political rhetoric can incite criminal action and how a peaceful transition of power can be shattered by a violent mob. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe for future episodes from the Calendar of Crime.